All right, so I don't know how familiar, I know John is familiar with this tool, and some of you have downloaded it and maybe taken a look at it. This is a tool I wrote maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I've actually been ARVing for about a decade now. And I was trained originally with the Farsight Institute when I lived in Atlanta. I just trained in kind of their derivative of CRV or TRV or whatever they call it. I think Courtney called it SRV. And I worked with some of their viewers. I think it was Diane Moore and Joey Jerome and Matthew Pfeiffer. They had their own little lottery system going on. And as soon as I was trained in remote viewing, I realized that I was good enough to hit a target, but I didn't think I was ever going to be good enough to be a real, all-star remote viewer. So I started contemplating what I could do with it, and immediately, I read some of Russell Targ's old books and read about the ARV experiments, and I said, hey, maybe this is my best use of this new skill that I developed. So I started setting up some projects on my own. Initially I had Ed Dame's Mind Dazzle tool, or was it Mind Dazzle, little thing that he put together. I think it was in the late 90s that he sold, and I had purchased in 1999. I think it was before I had done Farsight training. I actually tried Mind Dazzle a couple of times, and he had these little cue cards. I think it came with 100 or 200 little cue card-sized pictures. And I put those in envelopes, and I would associate with various outcomes, and I had pretty good success off the bat, like a lot of people do with ARV, and then it kind of success waned over time, and I realized one of the biggest challenges was to be able to associate or have 2 pictures assigned to different outcomes. And my theory is, working with the Farsight, we had some success, but we had somebody who was setting up these targets for us. And I always felt if somebody saw the targets ahead of time, it had a potential to taint the process. And I don't know that to be a fact, but it just was kind of my gut feeling that if somebody was looking at these targets ahead of time, I was slightly more likely to be drawn to the incorrect target. So I thought it would be useful to be able to set up these projects automatically without having anybody see the targets ahead of time. So being kind of a basic Excel hacker, I decided to go into Excel and see if I could write some VBA code that would do that. The first challenge I hit was, well, how do I want to group these targets? So they're dissimilar, but easy enough to pair. And I think I remember, Marty, I think you did the, was it the animal, vegetable, mineral experiments? I think I remember seeing a video on that a few years ago.
Yeah, that goes back quite a ways, but you're right, that's where I started.
I saw that. I was like, well, my targets, I do like interesting targets, so then I came up with the broad subfolders that we see here. Activities, animals, machines, natural objects, structures, vegetation. That was kind of just the broadest, highest level category I could think for my own target pool that I had. So I just started sorting it out. I had probably 20,000 pictures that I downloaded from Corbis. Now, before I had written this software, I would actually go into a directory that had 20,000 photos and randomly pick 2 without actually looking at them, and then rename them to outcome A and outcome B. And that worked, a fair amount of the time, but occasionally I would get 2 mountains or 2 water skiers or whatever, so that I grew frustrated by using that technique. So anyway, I guess out of that frustration was born this tool here. Now it is very, very utilitarian. The interface really, it was just designed for me. I wasn't actually planning on sharing this with the world, but I think John discovered how useful it was and thought that, that it would be of use to your team and some others possibly. So I guess what you guys can do is just, as we walk through it, think of what would make it more useful or helpful for maybe the methods that you're using. Any other ideas? I'm happy to go back and, redesign this and make it more user-friendly, add some features, etc. Ideally, there would be a tool online that we could all use that would set up our projects online and kind of collaborate that way. And that might be a future state that we can think about. So anyway, just some basics. I think some of you have downloaded the target pairing. As I click around, I guess you guys can still see my desktop okay. So I put my pictures into these broad categories here. I think each one of my folders probably has roughly, this one has over 2,000 pictures in it, so that's probably about average. That one has a little over 1,000. So I have roughly, in these 5 folders, probably 10,000 pictures. I've got some more that I haven't categorized yet. I like the truly random nature. I've had target pools that were much smaller, a couple hundred photos, and I would see some repeats over the course of, a month. And so I like the really large target set, so I don't see repeats that often. So that was step one, was to categorize these subfolders. And then step two was just to kind of think logically, how do I set these projects up? Well, I want to be able to obviously pull from dissimilar target sets. So that's where I created kind of these pairing groups that in my mind would create dissimilar target sets. And they're not perfect. I do still run into some issues here, but it does help. I think, probably 80% of the time I get a pretty good pair by using this logic. I will still run into, activity subject might be a mountain climber, and nature landscape might be a mountain. So, unless you're really going to create a complicated taxonomy hierarchy for your picture categories, that's still a possibility. Anyway, so do you guys want to actually see me create one, or talk through the logic, or what do you think would be the best way to use this time?
Yeah, I think it would be good to do a run. Just
okay,
go through the full motions.
All right. So typically, I work ahead of about a week ahead of time. So I actually looked. This case, I'm going to delete this folder here because I've already created that. But I'll look for a game this week. In this case, I just picked one at random. Dallas Cowboys are at the New York Giants. So Team A, put in Dallas Cowboys. Team B, New York Giants. Game type, NFL. And that will actually work its way into the, when the script builds the queue for each target set, this game type will work its way in. I put in the game date. It doesn't really go into the queue, but it helps me kind of classify the folder that gets created. It'll tag this date onto that folder name, so I know when that project is, when the actual event date is. Here, depending on how you like to view, I typically run anywhere from 3 to 4 up to 20 separate trials, depending on how well my viewing is doing and how bad I want to know the answer. Kind of like, I think some of you are familiar with Greg K, his work. I found that over time, by layering multiple passes onto a single project, you can at times get a really, really high confidence. This queue will just get tagged into the queue that gets generated. I think this is Ed's hybrid ARV queue. I haven't found that the queuing really, in my mind, makes that much of a difference. I've queued it, multiple different ways over the years, and they've all seemed to have about the same success rate. I think, talking to Greg K once, he said that he didn't even think that queuing even mattered. He thinks that you could just view, and your intention sets the, your intention will determine what you see or don't see. But I still use this queue at currently. Now this is kind of a neat feature, I thought, the direct targets. Occasionally, from my work with Alex's group and other work that I've done, you can directly target a winning team or a winning logo, etc. So if you put yes in here and come down to this section here where it says direct, the system will read these in and kind of randomly mix them with the ARV trials. So you can, run a TRN and not know if you're actually viewing a ARV trial or you viewing a direct target. And you might even put something that's just completely non-related to sports at all, like, my optimum investment. And that's a good way to kind of just sneak blind targets into your project if there's something else that you may be interested in viewing that's not sports related. But you can toggle this on or off. I know John had an issue when he added direct targets. I think it was always in the back of his mind when he was viewing that he might be at one of the cities, so it kind of threw him off. So I thought about maybe adding a third value, which is maybe, in which case you don't know if it actually threw in the direct targets or not. It would either throw in another ARV target or grab one of the direct targets. That way you don't even know if there's direct targets in the project folder. Now this randomizer offset, if you're familiar with VBA or any programming languages, the random function is not truly random. It's kind of a machine fabricated randomizer, and it will repeat numbers at times. Even if you seed it, I think in VBA you seed before you create a random number, you can seed it with the timer. But even doing that, it still seemed to create the same numbers more often than not. So my thought was I would take whatever random number that was generated by VBA and then just add a random amount to it, just key in any number here, and then I would get a kind of a truly random effect by offsetting the random number that VBA had generated. And that random number is used as it's pairing targets. It'll open, say, the nature landscape target and see that it has 2,000 photos in there. And it'll pick a number between 1 and 2,000 to determine which target am I going to use to pair. And so this number will get tacked onto that to make that truly random. So, all right, so let's just go ahead and once all these are in place, you can hit the Create Project. Depending on how new your PC is, it may take a while or it may run pretty quick. And obviously the number of trials, if you generate 50 or 60 trials, it will take a while. That one created pretty quickly. Now here's example of bad coding. If you hit this button again, it's trying to recreate the same folder based on game date, team A, team B. And since that folder already exists, I should give a nice message that said, this folder already exists. Please choose another game or delete the folder. But like I said, it's very utilitarian. I'm going to now go out to my projects folder. So this folder was just generated. You can see we have 12 subfolders here. Let me count to make sure, or 13. What did okay, so I had 3 ARV and I had 3 directs. So that created 13 subfolders. So I created I named the subfolder the same as the target reference number, so you don't have to peek into the folder to run your session. So typically I start at the top and I'll run a session on this TRN, and when I'm done I'll look into it and review my target pair. So in this case it was animal and structure. I actually put a little log file here so I can see where my pictures actually came from. In the event that I get two that just don't work well together, I can go to the source folder and maybe remove or reclassify one of my pictures. This is the actual cue that gets generated here. TRN there, and this cue is kind of assembled based on the inputs in the form. Dallas Cowboys versus New York Giants, NFL. I think I'm supposed to say, oh, you know what, I think I'm supposed to write NFL game in this game type. So maybe that should be NFL game. Winning team, current, correct, associated, photo site reference. Again, I think that's Ed's hybrid ARV targeting method. But I wanted to leave this open because I know other people have different cues that they like to run. Now, I did something with my Windows, the way my folders are displayed. I told it never to show me I don't want to see a thumbnail picture of what's in my subfolders. So even if I do accidentally click in here, all I'm seeing are these little generic picture icons. But I know some people like to have their settings where they see their thumbnails because maybe they work with a lot of personal photos or maybe they edit photos. I think maybe that's a feature that can be set on folder by folder. Now when I get to one, now here's the case where there are no photos. Obviously this is one of my direct targeting cues here. I think I created a little scoring section here in this tool. I think I've got an updated version where it actually puts the target reference number, and then you can score, and it'll put Cowboys and Giants here. And typically what I do is, after I run my session, review the photos. If I have a generic structure for my session, I might score it a 2, just because I got a generic gestalt. If I have a generic structure that maybe has a few castle-like features or has some stack stone or dry or gritty or making more target contact, maybe that'll be a 3. So my scoring scale is 0 through 4. 4 if I really, really hit this target well with jagged top and the stack stone and the arched doorway. If I really have a good representation of this target, then I'll score that a 4. And the 4s are rare, as you guys are probably well aware of. There are times when I might get a couple in a row, and there's times where I may run 8 or 10 sessions and not get a single 4. A lot of times you'll get the generic. Maybe you won't draw a porcupine, but you'll draw a circle, which indicates a life form, and that circle seems to keep repeating itself throughout your session. That I might score as a 2, because I'm picking up on some generic gestalt, but I don't have any real details. I may draw a little face in there with the little frizzy hair or something, and I might score that a 3. And if I draw, something that looks really close to this target, or even though it's a porcupine, then I would score that a 4. For me, for whatever reason, the orientation of my session does seem to help. If I draw an animal that's facing to the left, I'm more inclined to score that a little higher than if I have an animal that's facing to the right. And for whatever reason, over the years, it seems like orientation does matter for me personally. And I score that a little higher when things are orientated properly. What we got here? So here's one that could be considered a bad target pairing. Obviously we have subject activity, we have structure, but we both have strong vertical elements. And we got gray colors and hard and stony. So, unless you have a really strong session, it might be possible to confuse these two targets here. Let's see what else we got. There's another, it's a pretty good target pairing. Animal, and I guess this would be a machine here, most likely. Yep, animal's a machine, so. Let's see. So for the most part, the target pairing works pretty well for me. It's not to say that if we went through all these that we wouldn't find a pair that don't work too well together. Let's just look through the rest of them here.
Is it possible to use our own?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. You can. This is when I built this. One of the ideas was to make it completely customizable.
Okay.
So I have target location is set here, and what it does is it looks for each one of these picture subfolders that are labeled subfolder. It will look. I mean, you could call that target pool 1, target pool 2, and you could pair, just target pool 1 and target pool 2.
For column A, are those all just labels? And if you deleted those labels, then the code would still work?
Actually, these might be labeled here, but right here, these are tags. So the subfolder, the pair in the direct, the script will dynamically read those in and use that internal table to determine how it's going to, what subfolders it's going to read from, what pairs it's going to use, and if you've added any direct targets, what direct targets is it going to add. So these have to be labeled and they have to be spelled correctly. Otherwise, they'll be ignored.
If you inserted a row between row 14 and if you inserted a new row, would that mess up the coding, or?
Oh, good question. Let's give it a try. So we'll just say Atlanta Falcons. See what happens. I think it will read past that, but let's see. So where did we stop? Activity and animals. So let's see if we have anything that's beyond activity and structures. So it actually found structures. Activity, structures. So yeah, apparently it did read beyond this space here. I'll have to look and see if I just, yeah, I'm curious exactly what the code does now. I never even thought about it, but apparently it survived.
So we can add our own.
Whether or not there's any artifacts in the project where there's a problem here, I don't know. Same thing here. I'm not sure what happens if there's a blank space there. I'll just say, try one more. Seems to work. So made it to animal structures. So obviously, what was this target source here? Animals and structures, which is below this space here. So yeah, apparently it did load below that space. Interesting. It's been a little while since I've actually been in the code here, so I'm not as familiar with it as I should be.
Okay. I guess my I have my own folder of pictures.
Mm-hmm.
If I wanted to include it and have this code read it, would I just create a new subfolder, or like I'd enter a new line?
Yeah, you could just create a new one. You could overwrite one. You could just subfolder, new folder. Let's call it one word. Now look what happens though, since I don't have that folder at the moment when I try to create my project. Whoops. Now first it's telling me that I've already created this project.
Okay.
I need a nice message there. I'll just call it Tampa Bay Bucks or whatever. Now what happens? Validate your folders. You see how I get a invalid message there?
Yes.
That means that it couldn't find that picture file under ARV Pictures. It couldn't find new folder. Now if I created one, new folder, it might find it, which is okay, but I haven't actually, now see, that's the problem again.
You got to change the name.
Let me just change this. You can just put anything here. In this case, the project was created, but this new folder needs to be put into some pairing logic here as well. And you can actually pair, if you just have one big folder and you just want it completely random, I could pair new folder with new folder, and that would work.
Oh, okay, I see.
Or you could just, you could just call it folder 1 and folder 2, and you could delete the rest of these if you wanted, and just have, some real simple, basic pairing logic. So yeah, there's a lot of possibilities here. That's the one thing, even though this tool is very utilitarian and not very user-friendly, it's pretty powerful in terms of setting these projects up and giving you the flexibility to view the types of targets that you like or use the types of groupings that you like.
Right, right.
Mark, a question?
Sure.
Lines 14 through 21. So if you wanted to eliminate, say, nature landscapes, would you just type invalid over there on the right, or what would you do?
Yeah, I would probably, keep a master copy of this Excel and then delete this and create a new one where I just removed it. And then make sure that you remove it from the pairing. Because I think if it finds it, you know what? I think we were talking about this. I'll have to look again. I don't even think these matter, to be honest with you. I think the logic goes straight to these folders here. So I think when I was writing this, I initially wrote a little validation routine just to help people who are setting these projects up to make sure that they have all these folder names. But honestly, see what happens here. Aha. Suspicion confirmed. ARV Projects. So that's test A versus test B. Looks like it worked fine. So yeah, apparently it's the pairing logic that is the and is this validated? Let me check. Let's see. Machines. Oops. There's the test C, test D. I'm going to see if this one fails validation. Please validate your pairs. Okay. So, truthfully, that's not even necessary up here.
Okay.
But I think it kind of helps me organize my thoughts a little bit when I'm looking at it, but it's not necessary. It's just these folders down here which the system uses.
So if you specifically only wanted it to look at 3 or an X number of folders, you would only put okay, so you would just delete the rest of the other folders.
I would delete. I'm going to save this as a different name so I don't mess up my test. Yeah, I would just delete this and just say folder 1 versus folder 2 versus folder 3, folder 1 versus folder 3.
Okay, so the pairing logic makes it so it won't look at any other folder besides those 2 folders.
Correct.
Okay.
What I might do is just to increase the randomness of it a little bit. Since it generates a random number to determine which of these pairs inside that table it's going to pull from. And so I might do this, just to give it more choices as it's generating that random number so it doesn't keep coming up 1 or 2 or whatever.
Right.
But I don't think that's necessary. I'd have to see how it operates, but I would give it a few more choices myself, even if it is the same choice over again. Trying to think what else there is to know here.
Column D and column E, those are all automatically generated by the code, so you don't even touch
correct.
those? Okay.
So as we go down, like in this case, it's going to, I think it stops as soon as it finds a fail. No, it actually, it checked all of them. It said invalid, invalid, invalid.
Okay.
Now if I were to go create those real quick, well, I don't need to show you that, but if I were to go create those and throw a few pictures in there, it should pass and create your project.
Okay.
I think, the one thing that catches a lot of people, this error right here, I need to fix that. That's a real easy fix. It'll just say, you've already created this. Or I could give it a new number. I could create another project and then tag a timestamp onto it at the end. So you can create as many as you wanted to. Trying to think what else.
The B15, that label, or what is that in reference to? Are you saying that you can't have no more than 40 pairs?
Correct. Because the code reads these into a table, internal table, and I think I set it to 40. The table to occur 40 times. Mm-hmm. I could put that up to 500 or whatever. There's, it just happened to put the number 40. I thought that would be enough for most people. But yeah, so you can have up to 40 separate lines here. If you exceed that, I don't think it reads them in, so I don't think it causes a problem.
Oh, so it doesn't matter what row it's in, as long as it's 40 or less than 40. Okay.
Yeah. And for the most part, I think this has been working pretty well. I haven't really, how I offset the randomizer here. I don't really offset the randomizer as much here. For each trial, if we have, how many of these do we have? 16 through 33, whatever the number. Mm-hmm. We have 18. So the system's going to know that I have 18 potential pairing folders. And so then it's going to generate a number between 1 and 18. And so if it chooses number 16, it'll come down here. And it'll say, okay, I've got folder 2, so build my path to folder 2, and I've got folder 1, so build my path to folder 1. Look how many files I have in there. Then however many files I have, generate a random number between 1 and that number. And that's actually where I use the offset, and then offset by this number. If this offset plus this random number happens to exceed the total number of files in that folder, then it'll loop back to 1 and go up. But I don't really see the random nature of pulling these target pairs. It seems to be working okay. I'm just going to generate that number 1 through 18, or however many pairs that you have. It's going to generate that for each trial that gets created. Yeah, it seems to be working okay. I'm sure some pairs come up more than others, but that's why I tend to kind of mix them up a little bit, like I showed you here.
Okay.
Just to kind of increase the randomness of it.
For B10, is it yes or no, or just true, false?
It's yes or no.
Okay.
And let's see what happens here. If what happens if I put in no, but what if I put in something else here? Please enter yes or no. So that is one area where I do have a friendly message.
Okay.
And sadly enough, I think it is case sensitive, which I can fix. Let me go clean some of these projects up here.
And in general, people who are not familiar with EdDames wouldn't know what that is. Is that a correct statement?
This ARVQ?
No, the B10 direct targets.
Oh. Yeah.
Okay.
So the direct targets are just any other queue that you want to sneak into your project that may be related to the project at hand, or it may be completely different. I like it because sometimes I'll sneak in my optimum investment or my sanctuary or my optimum location, and I'm not even, when I sneak these in and I'm running my targets, sometimes I really do get a surprise. I'm like, oh, I forgot to even put that into my project. So I get a truly blind session on some other target of interest.
Oh, so, you can insert a specific, how do I say, So suppose you're working on like a missing cases person.
Yeah.
You can just enter direct and have a picture of that missing person inside your folder, or
you could say like Bob Smith, current location, or something like that, as the most recognizable feature. So
Okay.
this type of direct target, where it's strictly queue-based, you won't have any feedback necessarily unless
I see.
there is some real-world feedback that it does exist for this target.
And you can just link it or
Yeah.
something. Okay. Oh, that's.
I love running. One of my more interesting targets was the Aurora, Colorado shooting. I wanted to know where was that event planned. Remember the movie theater where the guy dressed up like the Joker and supposedly shot up a theater in Aurora.
Right.
And it was a definite alphabet soup agency that I drew, and that was when I drew that. It was almost, I forgot that I'd even put in that cue into my project. So when I drew it, it was a complete surprise, and so I got a truly blind session, and I had a really good target contact with where that event was planned.
Well, that's pretty
It
cool.
was very shocking when I saw my results. It was like a perfect depiction of headquarters building for one of our agencies.
Well, okay.
So I love to like mix those kind of esoteric or controversial targets.
Right.
In my projects.
For your scoring, it's just a visual thing for you, or it doesn't actually do. It doesn't actually affect the pairings or the overall program. It's just like an after thing.
Oh, the scoring.
Yeah, the scoring tab.
Yeah. Let's see. Why am I can't even get to my tabs right now. My start bar is kind of locked here. Maybe that's why. But yeah, I think I have a newer version. Oh, let me cancel that. There's my tab here. So scoring is not really automated. I have a newer version where it puts the target reference number in each trial, and it puts Team A here and Team B there. And typically I'll just go through and score like this.
Okay. And the way you did
half points, and then so then what I'll do is just kind of add it up here manually. Where's my auto sum button?
Maybe
behind this.
Oh, it's in the middle, above C.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, right there. Okay, so I'll typically just come in and auto sum these guys, and
okay.
that's kind of how I weigh my
okay, cool.
my confidence. But it seems to work pretty well if I stick with it, and I do enough trials. It works more often than not. Typically, when I spread these projects out over a week, I give myself a much better chance of being successful, because I have time to make better target contact with multiple targets that confirm each other. And I was trying to find out, if I kept really great detailed stats like Greg does, I might know that there's a certain threshold that is almost guaranteed success. It's rare to find that, but there are occasions where you have almost 95% confidence that a certain outcome is going to occur, because you've got so much data that is piled on to one particular outcome. And then there's other times where it just almost seems purely random. You're just getting 50-50, and who knows why that happens, but it does.
Okay.
So it'd be interesting that if this tool were online and lots of people were using it to get collect statistics and do some data analysis and find out if there really are some external influences on the success rate of this type of process, or if it's purely random, or my guess is it's mostly random, because I've had great success with the new moon and great success in the full moon, and I've had terrible success one day and great success the next day, and it just there's not a trend. I mean, there are times when I'll go a week or two and it seems like things are working well, my confidence is high, my sessions are clear, and then I'll go through another week or two where things just get kind of muddy. But, you know, it seems mostly random though.
Mark, a couple of times, in fact more than a couple, you've mentioned online. You obviously appreciate the value of that because then you'll be able to save the data and do that kind of analysis.
Yeah, you know, because we are all, I mean, we're creating a mountain of data in an area where there's just a lack of real scientific research.
Well, I just want you to know that's what App is in the process of doing. Tom Atwater, by June, he's going to present not only some of the data, but the database and the approach and all the work that we're doing in the various app groups will go into that database.
Interesting.
So we are, in fact, doing that. I am personally writing a interface for this winter wildcard thing. So right now the people in my groups are putting data in directly online and it's being saved. But it's not good enough yet in terms of the ability to do analysis. But that is where I'm heading.
Okay.
A question for you is, and I actually asked this of you, but I want to ask it again, because I really would like to use virtually all of your photos and go into them randomly, very much as you do, for picking the first one and then giving people an option to choose a second one, which is, you know, roughly orthogonal, which is the words. Well, you know what that means.
Yeah.
You have no problem with that?
Oh, absolutely not. No, you can feel free to use my target set or this code or any derivative. You know, it's kind of open source as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
However you want to use it, even if you don't, you know, want to use it in its current form, that is absolutely fine with me.
Well, see, what I really would like is there any way that you can form like an app group with this and you can start using it? And then,
yeah, I've had a couple of folks that I've worked with over the years, a couple of people from Alex's team that have done a little bit of side work. So yeah, I could team up with you guys and share my results.
that would be terrific, because then, you see, it would become part of the app database, and we might be able to get the answers to some of these questions.
We could. You know, it was Greg K. told me a long time ago he was a little suspicious of working in groups because he thought that his success rate went down, and the groups introduced a dynamic that he couldn't explain. And I don't agree with that 100%, but there are times when I wonder that, you know, if the group dynamic sometimes doesn't potentially throw off the success.
I believe you have to choose the group manager, and I'm suggesting you become a group manager, needs to choose people you feel very comfortable with, because I think if there is, you know, noise, personality noises and things like that,
and possibly, you know, there's a karma thing, you know, and I've always thought, well, what if I just take 30% of my winnings and just donate it to a charity of my choice? You know, would that, and I look at some of the people who've gone after this with just a purely greed mindset, and to me that has backfired. But if you say, hey, I'm going to learn something, I'm going to have some fun, I'm going to enjoy the process, and if I win something, I'm going to share it with others who probably need it more than I do. But I may take a little bit off the top to have a little fun, you know, enjoy life too. But it's not pure greed.
right?
Then, you know, how does that affect the outcome? You know, it actually did. You know, when this Philippine disaster. You know, I was compelled to like go online and donate $100 to one of the relief agencies.
Right.
And then that night I did a remote viewing. You know, I did a game, and it just came out perfectly clear. And I was like, somehow that was the universe replenishing that money that I just had donated to the Philippine disaster. And it's, you know, so I think that there's a karmic type of influence here. And, you know, if you can find the balance of do the right thing, yeah, you can make a little bit, but, you know, versus skimming a little bit and giving back and potentially going after the larger markets like commodities and Forex, where the potential to do damage to any one entity is pretty small.
Well,
the
that's where
markets are so large.
that's where I'm headed. I'm very impressed with everything that you've done and your attitude. I mean, we seem very much aligned, and if you want to start an app group, there's nothing to do. You're already started it then. It's a matter of you getting the people and working out a way of saving the data. Right now, save the data, all the name, we save individual data too, because ultimately we're going to be able to want people to look at their own history. Please do that. That would be terrific. I'd love to start interacting more and more with you.
I'm interested in contributing more to the overall body of data that hopefully leads us to better answers for this process. I've got a couple of people I've worked with I think that might be interested. I'm of the mindset I think a game a week is probably about enough lately for me.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good.
With a partner.
Good.
I don't know if you guys have any schedule that you work on, or is it just...
It's about a game a week. That's about, most of the groups do one prediction a week. By the time you get the TRNs out and get everything back, a week is just about right. Okay.
Yeah, that's a good schedule for most of us who have, other stuff happening in life.
Exactly.
I'm interested in this online database, too, that this person is designing. I'm actually a system, I used to be a kind of a system programmer and designer, so that's why I've had the mental image of an online workspace where we can set up projects, maintain stats, do the target pairing, et cetera.
Yeah. Well, that's what Tom Atwater is doing, and I don't know. I hope you can join us in June, because he's going to go into that in detail then, because that's when he's going to.
Is that at the next conference, IRV? Or?
Yeah, the ARV conference is a day after our workshop in Vegas. We set it up that way. Okay. So the dates have been set. I don't have them right in front of me, but I'll send you in fact, maybe I can find it. I'll send you an email with a link to our workshop, and in there it indicates that their dates are right after it. So theirs is late June, and ours starts like on a Tuesday through Friday, and Tuesday through Thursday, I think, and then they're Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. It's something like that. But I'll send that to you, Mark.
Definitely, I'll be interested in that.
I'll send that to you, and you can meet Tom there, and he tends not to want to talk too much about it now.
Is he one of the former military?
No.
Okay.
He's a guy who came to workshops. He's been to, TMI, and knows a lot of those guys, knows Joe Gallenberger and Skip and that sort of thing, and he's one of the principals in app.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I'm definitely interested in starting a project team.
Okay, that would be great. I'm sure he'd, like to work with you in some fashion. Let me ask you a question that's relevant to you and Alexis. Isn't there a way with some sort of Microsoft server to take the work you've done in Excel and get it online without a great deal of difficulty?
Which there was.
Looking at that, actually there is a new kind of, the Microsoft Office 2013 has a kind of a cloud office, but I think the database and the scripting is still kind of hard to run on a server. I think PHP or something might be a better, or MySQL or something might be a better tool.
Well, that's what's
there are sites where you can just rent coders to, if you come up with an idea, you can find an offshore coder or somebody who will work for relatively inexpensive to kind of implement your idea. So it may be worth.
Yeah. Okay. It's just so clear.
I'm kind of waiting for that too. I want the web to be as easy as an Excel macro.
Yeah.
Well, that's right. See, I'm writing my stuff in Perl just because all the stuff I've done with PIA before, I learned Perl.
Okay.
And I was working with the programmer. It just got too expensive because I always want to modify things. I always want to improve it, and it's just every time I went back to him, it would cost too much. So I'm doing it myself. But I just hope, seeing what you're doing and what Alexis has done, if that could get to be online, it would be just so beautiful.
Yeah, let me give that some thought. My brother's a programmer, and I've talked to him about this a few times. I will reach back out to him and see what he thinks the best way to translate some of this type of functionality to the internet would be.
Yeah,
I agree. If we could capture all this data, all the scoring, I mean, I have mountains and mountains of papers, and I am, kind of busy, so I haven't kept perfect records like Greg K. But if I had an online tool to just capture all these records, it would just be part of the process, and eventually, we would have so much data to mine and determine trends, et cetera.
That's exactly our goal, and that's where we're headed in app. And let me tell you, if you, and this goes for you too as well as Alexis, getting it online requires a server. The app server, we would make it available to you, because you also then would have, the data then would be coming into app and it would become part of the database. So it makes good sense to have the HTML and Perl or PHP coding, whatever, be on our server.
Eventually, we could get to kind of a more advanced type of pairing logic, and interestingly, I was noticing one of Ed Dame's students was selling target pairs for ARV, and he was selling, I don't know if it was 50 or 100 pairs for $60, but he claimed that these target pairs have all successfully been used 3 times without a reversal, and somehow the fact that they've each of those pairs has worked successfully 3 times without a reversal somehow makes them more valuable than just random pairs. I don't know that that's to be, to me that may be random, but it is an interesting concept too. Are there certain targets that are more likely to be switched, or certain types of targets you're more gravitate towards more?
Maybe, but if you took them out of a collection of 1,000, there's some by random would do that as well.
Yeah.
So you have to know a little bit more about how we got them, but the idea is good. In fact, I've thought about going back to our data and only, weaning out the ones that were not good and leaving the ones that had been successful, but don't.
So that's something we could start cataloging over time, is each target pair, what's the success rate on this pair, and if there is some validity, just by getting the pure data on it and knowing if there's any. There's a million different ideas we could explore.
Exactly.
Capturing the data. So, I'm interested. I will. I'll give some thought, and we can. I don't know if you guys have project meetings every so often. Be certainly happy to check back in from time to time.
Well, I think the way to proceed is probably just to email maybe me or John. You and John have worked together so much that he could be a really good contact to help you just get here. But I am happy to do that as well.
Okay.
So,
I'm happy to do it too. And there is the database already online that we enter data into. If you want to do that too, Tom has set that up already. So.
Okay, sure.
But this is great that you want to do this. I'll be very happy to liaise too, along with Marty, if he wants to. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. You can contact both of us, but just because I also have got a life, I'm pretty busy, and if John is volunteering, he might be the right one. Anyway, let's make it happen.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I'm excited about this. I have been for a decade. Since I first discovered that a future event can be predicted.
I know.
What's better than 50-50?
It's a grabber for so many of us. Well, not that many of us. But, I think we're trying to become sort of the focal point for all the people who are attracted to this. And,
Yep. So I'm definitely, my excitement hasn't wavered over the decade. Frustration has come and gone, but the excitement has been there.
Great.
But, well, glad you guys have found this useful, and, feel free if, like I said, next iteration, if people are using this and can think of some little minor updates that help, we can certainly do that. But I do want to think a little bigger in terms of, getting the functionality online and allowing in a more collaborative environment that captures statistics and et cetera. So I will give that some thought here.
Okay, terrific.
Mark, a question about the direct things. If I wanted to just add one, I can just go down to line 40, type in direct for column A, and then B.
Yeah, typically I just cut and paste, and then,
Okay.
Next.
B is
nuclear.
just the text file that it will create. Is that correct?
Yes, exactly. So
Okay.
next nuclear war or whatever, and
Okay.
yeah. So you'll get a random TRN number,
Mm-hmm.
and a target.txt file will contain the random TRN and this actual target text that you type in here.
Right.
So yeah, I found this to work. I don't know. I mean, I haven't read too much on. I've heard some people's philosophy that a Q needs to be written by a human and on paper and in an envelope, but I haven't found that to be the case. I think this works just as well. Because technically, I wrote the Q right here, so it's just a matter of assigning a TRN and sticking it in a file.
Right.
So,
I believe the intent has to be crystal clear. Doesn't have to be written crystal clear, but the intent inside, down to the sub, has to be crystal clear.
yeah, that may be it too. So.
When you go through these 20,000 photos and you categorize them, do you consciously try to match photos in terms of size? In other words, if you have a polar bear in one, I noticed you had a polar bear in one, and you had, I guess, a ship in the other, and those are mismatches in size. Do you take that into account at all when you?
I don't. I have typically gone to Corbis, and if you get a login, you can get kind of thumbnail-sized photos that, well, slightly larger than thumbnail. They're kind of postcard-sized photos that don't have a watermark, but they vary anywhere from like maybe 20K up to 300K. Generally speaking, they're pretty close, but
I don't mean the size of the file. I don't mean the size of the file. I mean the size of the subject, like the porcupine versus the whatever that is there, the castle.
Yeah.
Because the reason I mention that is that Ed May's target set, which also started with 20,000 images, and they boiled it down to 300. And one of their guidelines is that when they pair images, they're not going to be mismatches in the size of the content. In other words, they wouldn't have a porcupine versus a castle. They'd have two, porcupine and a snake or something. But
okay, interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know that I've ever noticed any sort of correlation between like just the size or the effect, the magnitude of the target and the, I will score structures a little lower because of the natural human tendency to kind of draw. If you're off target, you're more likely to draw some geometric shapes that coincidentally match up with whatever the structure is. So I look for better detail in my session when I have these type of target pairs, but I don't. But I've seen plenty of times where I do draw the porcupine, even though it's a small subject matter. And but yeah, it's interesting. Again, if we started cataloging stats, we might see some real trends where certain pairs one pair just overweighs the other. Pairs like the Eiffel Tower, it's just such an easy target, and so many viewers have viewed it. It can bleed through pretty easily. So I think it may have certain targets may have more propensity to kind of bleed through in a session. But I think even the uninteresting stuff can be acquired if you stay on structure.
Right.
Have you identified more successes, Mark, with certain target categories? Because that's always it's a concern of mine. I think I think there's biases involved here, so I don't. What's right for one is not right for the other. But my point is because I like vegetation and food or other categories may not have the handles that structures might.
I agree with that, and for the most part, like I said, I've gotten better because I have viewed so many different target types over the years that I think my ability to hit the smaller still life objects and vegetation is better than it used to be. But I still gravitate to more complex targets. But I found typically if there's subject activity at a target site and I'm accurately describing that subject activity, if somebody's mountain climbing or water skiing and I actually have a person orientated correctly and doing something similar, then that seems to be a pretty good indicator that I'm really on the correct target. If I just draw a random subject who's not engaged in the same activity, then that's a much less indicator. But so I found that subject activity for me is a pretty strong indicator. If I can get a active subject doing something and I've captured that activity pretty well, then it seems to be a high hit rate for me personally.
Yeah. John, is it true that Ed's 300 category group does not have any life forms, or is it all structure? Or I'm just curious.
In Ed May's photo set, they photoshopped out all the people, except in a few photos there's still people, but they're very small and insignificant. And that may be true of other categories based on a remark Ed put into one of his
Yeah,
papers.
that's interesting. I've heard other people have that theory that the more complicated targets sometimes aren't good ARV targets. For me, if there's 18 things going on at a site, then I have a better opportunity to pick up one of the things that might be going on. Sometimes you kind of keyhole, like there may be a person on a boat fishing, and there's big waves and the boat is really big and impressive, but for some reason you draw somebody's hand gripping a pole and you just keyhole on that one little aspect of this entire target site. But I think it still works for me, those type of targets. I just sometimes tend to keyhole on some real small aspect of it. But I think these are all, if we can back up some of these ideas with some real data, then we'll probably know the optimum formula.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, it's all interesting.
Great.
Okay, it sounds like we might be done.
Yeah, I think that's all I have. Feel free if you have any feedback, reach out to me or John, or we could certainly, depending on how much you may need to use this tool, or if you have a couple ideas that might make it more useful for your projects, then I'll be happy to, make a few modifications.
Okay. I just don't remember, are you part of the app general discussion group yet?
Not yet. Is that in like a Yahoo group or something? Or?
Yeah, it's a Google group. I will put you in if you would like.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be interested in being in on that group.
Okay, I'll put you in right now, and then it sounds like the next step is for you to start your own group, and the way we usually communicate is by setting up a Google group with some name that, appeals to you. But that's sort of optional. Some of the groups do not do that. They just work on their own.
And I may just test solo for a while, but happily share my results. Just to kind of see how that goes. And then I've got a couple partners I may introduce at some point and see how that works.
Okay, that'd be great. Okay, we'll make that happen.
All right. Well, thanks for setting this up. Good talking.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and thank you
very much.
Thank you very
Look
much.
forward to talking to you soon.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.